There's a clock ticking right now, not the one on your wall or the one on your wrist. This clock has no face, no numbers, no alarm that rings. When your time runs out, it just stops. And when it stops, everything you meant to do, everything you plan to start tomorrow, every dream you filed away for someday disappears with it. You know this already. Somewhere deep inside, you've always known it. Yet here we are, living as if we have forever, acting as if next week is guaranteed, behaving as though our years stretch out endlessly before us like some infinite highway with no final exit. They don't. Let me tell you about Garrett Morrison, 47 years old, brilliant architect, working at one of the most prestigious firms in Chicago. On paper, Garrett had made it. Corner office, six-figure salary, his name on buildings that touched the sky, but every single day, driving to that office, Garrett felt something gnawing at him, a quiet voice reminding him of what he actually wanted to do with his talent. 15 years earlier, fresh out of graduate school, Garrett had a vision. He wanted to design sustainable housing for communities that couldn't afford architects. Not luxury condos, not corporate headquarters, homes. Real homes for families who'd been priced out of decent living spaces. He'd sketched hundreds of designs, created models, written proposals. The work excited him in ways nothing else ever had. But then life happened. Student loans demanded payment. A job offer arrived from a prestigious firm. Just for a few years, he told himself. Just to get established, build some savings, make connections. Then he'd pursue his real dream. Those few years became 15. Every Monday morning, Garrett would sit in project meetings about shopping centers and luxury apartments, and that voice would whisper, "This isn't what you're supposed to be doing." Every Friday evening, he'd tell himself, "Next year, when I have more saved, when the timing is better, when I'm truly ready." Next year never came. The timing never improved. Ready remained forever, just out of reach. Then, one Thursday afternoon, Garrett got a phone call. His college roommate, Michael, had died. Sudden heart attack, 51 years old, gone. At the funeral, Michael's wife handed Garrett something. "He'd want you to have this," she said, passing him a worn leather journal. "You two always talked about your dreams together." He kept writing about his even after graduation. That night, Garrett opened the journal. Page after page, he found Michael's plans. A restaurant concept he'd wanted to launch. Recipes he'd developed. Locations he'd scouted. Business plans he'd refined. All of it meticulously documented, beautifully detailed, absolutely perfect, and none of it ever happened. Between the business plans, Garrett found something else. Entries that made his hands shake as he read them. "Not this year. The kids need stability. Maybe when we have more saved. I'm not quite ready. Yet. Need to learn more first. Next year looks better. I'll start then." Garrett was reading his own thoughts in someone else's handwriting. His own excuses in another man's words. His own delays mirrored back at him from beyond the grave. The journal ended abruptly. Mid-sentence. Mid-plan. Mid-life. Garrett didn't sleep that night. He sat in his expensive apartment, surrounded by the rewards of a career he'd never truly wanted, holding evidence that tomorrow isn't promised to anyone. Not to Michael. Not to him. Not to you. He realized something that changed everything. He'd been spending his life like a wealthy man spends money, casually, assuming there's always more where that came from. But time doesn't work like money. You can't earn more of it. You can't borrow it. You can't save it for later. You can only spend it, and it's already being spent whether you're paying attention or not. The next morning, Garrett walked into his managing partner's office and gave notice. "Are you insane?" his colleague asked. "You're at the peak of your career. What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 15 years ago." Now, here's what I need you to understand. This isn't just Garrett's story. This is your story. The details differ, but the pattern remains identical. You have something inside you, something you know you're meant to do, meant to build, meant to become, and you've been postponing it. Maybe it's a business you want to start. Maybe it's a relationship you need to fix or leave. Maybe it's a skill you want to master, a book you want to write, a place you want to live, a person you want to become. Whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about right now. You can feel it. And you've been waiting, preparing, planning, getting ready to get ready. Stop. Listen carefully. Every day you wait, you're not standing still. You're moving backward, because while you're waiting, the world keeps spinning. Opportunities vanish, markets shift, People move on. Your energy diminishes. Your courage fades. And worst of all, you start believing your own excuses. I need more experience first. No, you need experience, which only comes from starting. I don't have enough money saved. You'll never have enough if enough keeps changing based on your fear. It's not the right time. It will never feel like the right time. Never. The right time is a fantasy you've created to protect yourself from the risk of action. I'm not ready yet. Ready is a destination you reach by moving, not by standing still. Do you know what these excuses really are? They're not rational assessments of your situation. They're your fear wearing a mask of prudence. They're your doubt dressed up as wisdom. They're your comfort zone fighting desperately to keep you exactly where you are. Because here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You're afraid. Afraid of failure, yes. But more than that, you're afraid of success. Afraid of change. Afraid of discovering that you actually could have done it all along. Which would mean admitting you've wasted years you can never reclaim. That fear has cost you more than you realize. It hasn't just delayed your dreams. It's stolen your vitality. It's diminished your spirit. It's turned you into someone who watches life instead of living it. Time is the only resource you absolutely cannot replace, cannot renew, cannot recover. Once it's gone forever. And you've been treating it like it's unlimited. It isn't. Garrett Morrison learned this holding a dead man's journal filled with brilliant plans that never became reality. What's it going to take for you to learn it? Another year of the same regrets? Another decade of someday? Or are you going to wake up right now, this moment, and recognize that your clock is ticking and you don't know how much time remains? You think waiting costs you nothing. You believe that postponing your decisions keeps your options open, keeps you safe, buys you time to prepare. But every moment you hesitate, you're paying a price far greater than you imagine. The bill comes due in ways you never anticipated. And by the time you see the total, the damage is already done. Let me show you exactly what I mean. When you delay something by 1 year, you don't just lose 12 months. You lose the compounding effect of those 12 months. If you'd started your business today, instead of next January, you wouldn't just be 1 year ahead next January. You'd be 3 years ahead, because that first year teaches you lessons that accelerate year 2, which sets up advantages for year 3. Delay steals not just time, but momentum, knowledge, and the exponential growth that comes from early action. Think about compound interest. Put money in an account at 25, and it grows into something substantial by 65. Start at 35 instead, and you don't get 40 years of growth versus 30. You lose the most powerful decade of compounding entirely. The same mathematics applies to skills, relationships, businesses, and every meaningful pursuit in your life. Every day you're not moving toward what matters. You're not standing still. You're falling behind people who started yesterday. You're watching the gap widen between who you are and who you could have been. Now, let me introduce you to Amira Osman. 32 years old, pharmaceutical researcher with a doctorate in molecular biology, brilliant mind, groundbreaking ideas, and absolutely paralyzed by the need to be perfectly prepared before taking action. 6 years ago, Amira developed a novel approach to drug delivery systems. Her research showed promise for making life-saving medications accessible to populations in remote areas. She knew she needed to start a company to bring this innovation to market. She had the science, she had the passion, she had everything except the willingness to begin before she felt completely ready. So, she waited. She told herself she needed more research, first. Then she needed more money saved. Then she needed more industry connections. Then she needed to attend more conferences, read more papers, understand more about business operations. Always more. Never enough. Meanwhile, 3 of her former colleagues left their research positions and launched their own biotech ventures. They didn't have Amira's credentials. They didn't have her expertise. But they had something more valuable they started. One of them failed within 18 months, lost his investors' money, had to go back to a research job. But he learned more in those 18 months than Amira learned in 3 years of reading business books and attending seminars. When he launched his second venture, he knew exactly what not to do. The other 2 succeeded, not because they were smarter or better prepared, because they were willing to learn through action instead of preparing through analysis. 6 years later, Amira finally started her company. She had everything perfectly planned. Detailed business model, comprehensive market analysis, strong financial projections. It was flawless on paper. Then reality hit. The market had evolved. Competitors had emerged. Technologies had advanced. The gap she'd identified 6 years earlier? Others had already filled it. Her perfect plan was perfectly suited for a market that no longer existed. But here's what really devastated her. She realized her 6 years of preparation had actually been 6 years of hiding. She'd convinced herself she was being responsible, being smart, being strategic. In truth, she'd been terrified. Terrified of risking her reputation, terrified of failing publicly, terrified of discovering her idea might not work. So she'd disguised her fear as diligence, called her procrastination preparation, mistook her paralysis for prudence. And the cost? It wasn't just 6 years. It was the confidence she would have built by starting imperfectly, the resilience she would have developed by facing early challenges, the network she would have created by being in the arena, the credibility she would have earned by taking risks when others held back. Her colleagues who started their company 6 years earlier, they now had track records. They'd raised multiple funding rounds. They'd built teams. They'd made mistakes and learned from them. They'd established reputations as founders, not researchers who talk about founding. Amira entered the market as a beginner competing against veterans, all because she'd waited to feel ready. This is what delay actually costs you. Not just the time that passes, but everything that time could have built, every relationship you could have formed, every skill you could have developed, every iteration that could have improved your idea, every door that could have opened from the doors you'd already walked through. When you postpone starting that difficult conversation with your spouse, you don't just delay resolution, you accumulate resentment, you establish patterns of avoidance. You teach yourself that escape is easier than honesty. Each day of silence makes the conversation harder, not easier. The gap widens, the words become more difficult to find. What could have been repaired with discomfort becomes irreparable through neglect. When you postpone leaving that job that's crushing your spirit, you don't just delay happiness. You lose belief in your own capability to change. You watch yourself accept less than you deserve. You train yourself into helplessness. Your skills stagnate while industries evolve. Your network remains static while others build connections. Your courage atrophies while challenges keep coming. When you postpone getting healthy, you don't just delay fitness. You establish deeper patterns of neglect. Your body adapts to poor treatment. Reversing damage becomes harder than preventing it would have been. You miss years of feeling energetic, capable, alive. You watch others age gracefully while you age, carelessly, knowing you chose this through 1,000 small decisions to start tomorrow. The mathematics of delay are brutal and unforgiving. If you write 1 page per day starting today, you'll have a book in a year. Wait 1 year to start, and you don't just delay the book. You miss the discipline that daily writing builds. You miss the ideas that would have emerged through the practice. You miss becoming the person who writes daily, which is far more valuable than any single book. If you invest 1 hour daily into learning a high-income skill starting today, you'll be moderately proficient in 6 months and potentially earning from it within a year. Wait 1 year to start, and you're not 1 year behind. You're 2 or 3 years behind because the skill compounds. Early competence unlocks opportunities that accelerate further learning. Delay keeps you locked out of those accelerating returns. Amira discovered this truth too late. By the time she launched her biotech company, she wasn't just competing against companies 6 years older. She was competing as someone without the battle scars, without the hard-won wisdom, without the network effects that come from being in the game. And here's the cruelest part. All her preparation didn't make her more ready. It made her more anxious, because the more she studied and planned, the more she discovered how much she didn't know. Her knowledge of potential problems grew faster than her confidence to solve them. Action would have solved this. Imperfect action, starting small. Making mistakes when the stakes were low. Building genuine capability through real experience rather than theoretical understanding. But she'd chosen comfort over growth, certainty over opportunity. The illusion of control through planning over the reality of progress through doing. You're making the same choice right now with something in your life. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That thing you keep postponing. That decision you keep delaying. That action you keep analyzing instead of taking. Every day you wait, the price increases, not linearly, exponentially. The gap between where you are and where you could be doesn't grow day by day. It multiplies. It compounds against you instead of for you. Stop calculating the risks of starting. Start calculating the cost of continuing to wait. Because that cost is real, it's mounting, and unlike money, you can never earn back the time you're spending right now on hesitation. The question isn't whether you can afford to start. The question is whether you can afford to wait one more day. Right now, at this exact second, you have something no amount of money can buy and no power on earth can extend. You have this moment, not yesterday, which is already gone, not tomorrow, which doesn't exist yet. Just this, and what you do with this moment determines everything that follows. Most people never grasp this. They live perpetually in two places that don't exist, the past they keep reliving and the future they keep planning for. Meanwhile, the only time that's actually real, the only time where life actually happens, slips through their fingers unnoticed. The present moment isn't just the only time you have. It's the only time there is. Everything else is memory or imagination. Every achievement, every failure, every choice, every consequence happens right now, not later. Now, when you truly understand this, everything changes. Because if now is all you have, then waiting for a better now makes no sense whatsoever. The perfect moment you're waiting for? It can only arrive as this moment, and this moment is already here. So why do you keep postponing action until conditions improve? Because you've been sold a lie. The lie says that successful people wait for the right circumstances before they move, that they analyze carefully, prepare thoroughly, and strike only when everything aligns perfectly. That's backwards. Successful people don't wait for perfect conditions. They create conditions through action. They understand something fundamental. You don't get ready, then start. You start, then get ready through the experience of starting. Think about learning to swim. You can read every book about swimming, watch every video, study every technique, memorize every stroke, but until you get in the water and start moving, you cannot swim. The readiness comes from doing, not from preparing to do. Everything works this way. Everything. You don't build confidence by waiting until you feel confident. You build it by acting despite lacking it. Each small action creates evidence that you can act, which makes the next action easier. Confidence is a result of action, not a prerequisite for it. You don't find clarity by thinking harder about your options. You find it by choosing something and moving forward. Clarity emerges from engagement, not from analysis. The path becomes visible by walking it, not by staring at maps. You don't develop capability by preparing endlessly. You develop it by attempting things slightly beyond your current ability. The struggle itself builds the capacity you thought you needed before struggling. This is the truth that separates people who achieve from people who aspire. Achievers understand that the starting line and the learning line are the same line. You don't prepare, then start. You start, and that becomes your preparation. But your mind fights this truth viciously. It wants guarantees before commitment. It wants certainty before risk. It wants to see the entire staircase before taking the first step. And because these conditions never materialize, you stay exactly where you are, convinced you're being rational when you're actually being ruled by fear. Let me be direct with you. That voice telling you to wait until you're ready? That's not wisdom. That's resistance. That's your comfort zone defending itself. That's the part of you that would rather avoid temporary discomfort than gain permanent growth. And it's costing you everything. Because while you wait for perfect timing, time itself is moving. Opportunities come with expiration dates. Markets evolve. People move on. Your own window of peak energy and capability slowly closes. The chance you have today might not exist tomorrow, and you'll never know what you missed because you were too busy preparing to grab it. Here's what you need to do instead. Make a decision right now about that thing you've been postponing. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you've thought about it more. Now, then take one immediate action, no matter how small, that moves you toward it. Not a perfect action, not a complete action, just any action that creates momentum. If you've been thinking about starting a business, register the domain name today. Right now, not the whole business plan, not the perfect product, just claim your space in the digital world. That simple act transforms you from someone thinking about it into someone doing it. If you've been thinking about getting healthy, put on exercise clothes immediately after reading this. Don't plan the perfect workout routine. Don't research optimal nutrition strategies. Just put on the clothes. Then do 10 minutes of movement. Any movement. You're not trying to transform your body today. You're trying to become someone who takes action instead of planning action. If you've been thinking about writing, open a document and write 200 words about anything. They can be terrible words, They can be useless words. The quality doesn't matter. What matters is that you become a person who writes, not a person who thinks about writing. Do you see the pattern? Small, immediate, imperfect action beats large, delayed, perfect plans every single time, because action generates information, creates momentum, and builds identity. Planning does none of these things. Every successful person you admire started exactly where you are now. Uncertain, unprepared, unclear about the full path ahead. The difference between them and people who stayed stuck wasn't superior circumstances. It was the willingness to move before they felt ready. They understood something crucial. You cannot steer a parked car. You have to be moving before you can direct where you're going. Sitting still, analyzing the best route gets you nowhere. Starting in approximately the right direction and adjusting as you move gets you everywhere. This is what breaks the cycle of perpetual preparation. Not more planning, not more research, not more thinking. Action. Immediate, imperfect, course-correcting action. And yes, you'll make mistakes. Absolutely. You'll start down paths that lead nowhere. You'll waste effort on approaches that don't work. You'll discover your initial assumptions were wrong. Good. Those aren't failures. Those are tuition payments in the University of Real-World Experience. They're how you actually learn what works versus what sounds good in theory. Amira Osman's colleagues who started their companies immediately, they made dozens of mistakes she avoided by waiting, but they also gained dozens of insights she never found in her research. When they failed forward. When she waited, she simply stayed behind. The same choice faces you constantly. You can avoid mistakes through inaction, or you can make progress through imperfect action. You cannot have both. The path of zero mistakes is the path of zero results. So stop demanding certainty before commitment. Stop requiring readiness before starting. Stop insisting on clarity before choosing. These are impossible standards that guarantee you'll never begin. Instead, accept uncertainty as the price of admission to everything worthwhile. Embrace being a beginner. Welcome the discomfort of not knowing what you're doing, because that discomfort means you're growing. The present moment is offering you a choice. Stay comfortable and stagnant, or become uncomfortable and alive. Protect yourself from possible failure, or expose yourself to possible greatness. Which will it be? Because 1 year from now, you'll arrive at the future either way. The only question is whether you'll arrive as someone who spent that year preparing to start, or someone who spent it building something real. Your clock is ticking. This moment is already passing. What are you going to do with the next one? Right now, at this exact second, you possess something more valuable than all the preparation in the world. You have this moment, not yesterday's moment that's already spent, not tomorrow's moment that hasn't arrived and might never come. This one, the one you're living in as these words reach you. This is the only moment where change happens. This is the only moment where decisions transform from thoughts into reality. Everything else is either memory or fantasy. And you've been living in fantasy, haven't you? Planning your future, analyzing your options, waiting for conditions to align perfectly before you act. Perfect conditions are a myth. They don't exist, they never have, they never will. Show me one person who achieved something significant, and I'll show you someone who started before they felt ready, who moved forward despite incomplete information, who acted when others were still deliberating. Success doesn't come from perfect timing. It comes from making imperfect timing work through commitment and adjustment. You've been waiting for certainty in an uncertain world. You want guarantees in a reality that offers none. You're demanding a promise of success before you're willing to risk failure. And while you wait for these impossible conditions, your life is happening. Your opportunity window is closing. Your potential is aging like fruit on a tree, beautiful for a season, then overripe, then rotten, then gone. The people you admire didn't have advantages you lack. They had the same fears, the same doubts, the same incomplete preparation. The difference? They moved. Anyway, they understood something you haven't yet grasped. Starting imperfectly beats waiting perfectly every single time. When you start, even clumsily, you enter a different realm. You stop being someone who thinks about doing things and become someone who does things. That identity shift is worth more than 1,000 perfectly crafted plans sitting in your drawer. Because here's what happens when you actually begin. Reality gives you feedback. The market tells you what works. People show you what they actually want, not what you theorize they might want. You discover your assumptions were wrong, not all of them, but enough that your perfect plan would have failed anyway. Except now you're failing forward, learning, adjusting, improving. You're in the game instead of watching from the stands. Every expert you've ever encountered was once a beginner who refused to stay a beginner. They became experts by doing the thing badly until they could do it adequately, then adequately until they could do it well, then well until they could do it masterfully. None of them waited until they were masters before they started. That's not how mastery works. You think starting now means starting from zero. It doesn't. You're already starting from behind zero because you've spent months or years building momentum in the wrong direction. Momentum toward comfort, toward safety, toward the slow death of unrealized potential. You need to reverse that momentum, and the only way to do it is to make a different choice right now. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not next month when conditions improve. Now, let me destroy another illusion you're carrying. You believe you're waiting until you have enough resources, enough money, enough time, enough knowledge, enough support. But resources don't create action. Action creates resources. When you commit to something and start moving, resources appear. Not magically, I'm not selling you fantasy. But when you're actively pursuing something, you notice opportunities you'd previously overlooked. You attract people who resonate with your commitment. You develop skills you didn't know you needed. You find ways to make things work because you have to, not because you theoretically could. Sitting still, preparing, waiting, none of that creates anything. You just consume resources while generating nothing. Time passes. Money gets spent on living expenses and comfort purchases. Energy dissipates into distraction and worry. Meanwhile, you're not one step closer to what matters. The moment you start, everything shifts. Suddenly that friend mentions someone who could help. That article you read contains exactly the information you needed. That skill you learned years ago becomes relevant in a way you never anticipated. Not because the universe rewards action, though sometimes it feels that way, but because you're now paying attention differently. You're engaged. You're alert. You're hunting for solutions instead of admiring problems. Here's another truth. Your fear doesn't diminish with preparation. It grows. The more you research every possible obstacle, the more obstacles you find. The more you study what could go wrong, the more convinced you become that it will go wrong. Analysis paralysis isn't caused by insufficient information. It's caused by too much information without the filtering mechanism that experience provides. You can't think your way to courage. You can only act your way to it. Courage is built through small acts of bravery that prove to yourself you're capable of handling discomfort. Each time you do something that scares you and survive, you become slightly braver. Each time you wait because you're scared, you become slightly more timid. You're training yourself every single day, either toward action or toward avoidance. There's no neutral ground. Every choice reinforces a pattern. Right now, you're reinforcing the pattern of delay, of waiting, of someday, break it, do something today that moves you toward what you actually want. Not something big, not something perfect, something real. Make the phone call you've been avoiding. Send the email you've been drafting in your head for months. Spend 30 minutes on that project instead of spending 30 minutes explaining to yourself why you can't start yet. The size of the action matters less than the fact of the action, because once you break the pattern of inertia, everything becomes easier. The hardest part of running isn't the 5th mile. It's getting off the couch. The hardest part of writing isn't the 50th page. It's the first sentence. The hardest part of building anything isn't the middle of the journey. It's the beginning. And you've been stuck at the beginning, refusing to begin, for far too long. Stop thinking about the entire journey. Stop overwhelming yourself with everything you'll need to figure out between here and success. You don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. You just need to take the first step, then the second, then the third. The staircase reveals itself as you climb. This moment, right now, is offering you a choice. You can continue the pattern you've been following, thinking, planning, preparing, waiting, hoping conditions improve. Or you can interrupt that pattern with a different decision. A decision to move, to start, to do something, anything, that takes you from spectator to participant. What's it going to be? Because I need you to understand something crucial. This feeling you have right now, this spark of motivation, this moment of clarity, where you see the truth about your delays, it will fade. Motivation is temporary. Inspiration is fleeting. You'll finish reading this and feel energized, and then tomorrow you'll wake up and the old patterns will reassert themselves. The doubts will return. The excuses will sound reasonable again. The comfort of waiting will feel wise instead of cowardly. Unless you do something right now that makes tomorrow different from yesterday. Unless you take one concrete action that breaks the pattern. Unless you prove to yourself, today, that you're capable of choosing differently. The power you have in this present moment is absolute. You cannot change the past. You cannot control the future. But you have complete authority over what you do right now. Complete. Nothing and no one can stop you from making a different choice in this moment except you. So make it. Choose action. Choose movement. Choose to become the person who started instead of the person who kept waiting. Choose now.